Welcome to another VWO. Today, I'm really happy to be partnering with Mr. Rishi Rawat from Frictionless Webinar. Rishi, quite popular guy on LinkedIn, in the know. Rishi runs his agency, as I call it, Frictionless Commerce, and he's popular guy. Rishi is sort of a guru and a master of all things, and we're privileged to have a webinar here. Um, regular listeners of the webinar might be familiar that Rishi's been with us previously, and due to the high NPS scores we had on that webinar, we've kind of forced to bring Rishi back. So over to you, Rishi, and thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for having me on board again, and I'm very excited to talk about the love of my life. I don't have children, so product pages are my children, and I study them closely, and I'm very fascinated by that subject. I want to keep this very casual, and I want to kind of quickly go through the core points that I want to make, and hopefully, as I'm going through it, if I'm talking about stuff, questions will emerge. As those questions come up, if you can share them with us, I'm happy to address all of those questions. The whole purpose of this is to answer your questions. So with that, I'm going to kind of get started. And I'm going to start off with the fact that I've been doing this now for 13 years. I've been effectively in the wilderness, thinking about this subject, obsessing about the idea of conversion optimization. And what has happened is that in that time, there are 5 core lessons that have really emerged. And I want to cover those 5 lessons with you. So the first thing is, let's start off at the top and really ask ourselves, how do shoppers actually search online? What is that mechanism like? Then we're going to talk about the fact that the marketer has just one shot. I think it's really important for us to understand the context. The third one is how to think about your product page. The next one is developing a product page sales pitch. And you'll notice that I've used the word sales pitch here, and it's very intentional. I think we tend to look at our product pages as being a description, and we need to get away from that and look at it as a sales pitch, and we'll cover that on that section 4. And then finally, we'll talk about how do we maximize impact. So I'm just going to get started. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to play a short video to show how shoppers search online. And this is just a example of how someone will look for something like a curling iron. They see all these ads, they see what's promising, they kind of scroll down a little bit, and then they click on the one that seems the most relevant to them. So they're still kind of, deciding. And now they've come to the product page, and the product page is where they close the pop-up if they don't want to see it. And then the product page is where they are kind of deciding, is this the curling iron I want to buy? Is this the brand I want to focus on? This is how shoppers behave. And so it really goes from a search intent to a search result to clicking on that result, coming to the product page or wherever. Well, let me put it this way. What happens is the way Google product listing ads are structured is that they configure to the product page. So the people who are seeing those little tiles are clicking on them, coming directly to your product page. They're not going to your home page. They're not going to your category page. You can do custom coding to make that happen. The default setting is that they come to the product page. So really, it's really interesting. But for this user that has come to this product page looking for a curling iron, they've never heard of this brand. They don't care about this brand right now. They've come to the product page. The entire website is that one product page. And I think it's really important to kind of look at your product page as being your entire website versus just being a page where you're describing what that product does. And then the home page is where you talk about your brand, and your about us page is where you talk about your origin story. Actually, that's not how it actually happens. The user is literally coming to this page and they are deciding in a fraction of a second if you deserve their attention or not. And 9 times out of 10, they conclude that we don't, and then they leave the website and they look at some of the other tabs that are open. That is what we're competing against. So I want to talk about this idea of one shot. This is a screenshot from my website. I've looked at data for 400 e-commerce websites, so I know that this is very common for everyone. And I would say, so my return rate is 11%, right? Your return rate might be 20%, and 20% is on the upper end. The fact is that even if it's at 20%, you still have 80% of people that are never coming back to the website. And so for me as a marketer, I need to convert the shopper in this session itself. Again, this is the lens through which I'm looking at the problem. And this is how we kind of optimize conversion rates. So how should we be thinking about our product pages? In the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about different mental models to think about your product page. So the first thing I want to share, which is a beautiful idea, is that every 24 hours, millions and millions of people land on a product page for a product that they've never seen, and based on the sales pitch on that product page, simply based on the sales pitch on that product page, they part with their hard-earned dollars, which means basically they're taking their wallet out and they're saying, okay, this is the curling iron I want to buy. This looks really good. They've covered all the questions I had. I'm just going to buy from them. They don't even know who the brand is at this point, right? I mean, that's the magic of product page optimization, and this happens millions of times on websites every single day. So we have to really say, okay, it's already happening. How do we make this happen more for our product pages? Another thing I like to talk about is I kind of look at the product page as being like a direct response ad. Some of you on this webinar might be very young. You might have never seen a direct response ad. I'm old school. I'm a big fan of old school direct response ads. And the way they would work is that you would have a magazine, and in the magazine there'd be a page devoted to a product, and there would be a little coupon box. You would enter your information, you'd send a mail to them, and that's how they would track it. I like to look at the product pages and treat it like a direct response ad. And I find that when I treat it like a direct response ad, it really sharpens my thinking versus thinking about it as a place where I'm describing the features and benefits of the product. The purpose of the product page, and make no mistake about this, the purpose of the product page is to not describe your product, it is to sell your product. So the product page is where we're making our sales pitch, and it's really important for us to really understand that. I'm going to talk about this in a few different ways because I think people learn differently. So another way of looking at this is that think of your product page as, or think about your ad as a movie trailer, right? So if you're advertising on Facebook, a lot of people are spending a lot of money on advertising on Facebook, which is a good thing. But the ads that you're showing on Facebook are essentially just a trailer. And when they come to the product page is the feature film. And if you think about it from that perspective, you'll realize that we are doing the opposite. Right now, we are spending a lot of time. One of the surveys I do with customers is, when was the last time you made an adjustment to your ad? And they have three options. Almost always they'll say, in the last couple of days. Then I asked them, when was the last time you rewrote the description in your product page? And the answer is invariably, we don't remember. And so I want to flip that. I want to look at the product page as a feature film. Can you imagine watching a trailer where the trailer is really promising and really appetizing, but then you go watch the movie and the movie is terrible? That's a bad experience. So you want to start working on your ads after you've nailed your product page. Another way of looking at it, and we covered this earlier, is that for paid traffic that is coming to the product page, similar to the curling iron example that I showed you, the product page is not just one page in your website, it is your entire website. And so you have to think about your entire website as being that product page for that specific type of buyer. So now that we've kind of covered in different angles the importance of the product page, I want to actually talk about how do we construct the sales pitch on that product page. So this is a mental model. So there are three aspects of the sales pitch that we need to think about. There are three parts of it. So the first part of it is the opening. And the purpose of the opening is to not close the sale. And I think this is a mistake that we make as marketers. We immediately start focusing on closing the sale. The purpose of the opening is to actually get the user to stop ignoring the alternatives. Typically, when a user comes to our website, they have multiple tabs open. That means they are looking at multiple curling irons, or they're looking at multiple air purifiers, or they're looking at multiple vacation destinations. And you are just one of the tabs. So before I'm ready to convert you, I have to first convince you that please ignore the other tabs. So you have to write copy in a very specific way. And we have a very specific formulation for this. The second thing you're doing as part of your opening is you are helping them overcome the unfamiliarity barrier. This is a really important concept. We are so focused on trying to get the person to buy our product that we don't realize that you can't even begin to start getting the person to buy a product unless you've made the buyer comfortable with who you are. So you have to tell them your why we exist story, and that's going to be part of the opening. Now, once you cross the opening, you get the middle of the sales pitch. The middle of the sales pitch is where you are really demonstrating expertise, like your raw knowledge and expertise about this product. you're talking about all the features of the product and how you really want to let the buyer know that you don't just sell a curling iron or you don't just sell an air purifier. You are actually an expert in that subject. You want to like position yourself as an expert. You need to also, during the stage itself, anticipate all the missing features that the product might have or the inferior features that the product might have and start addressing them upfront. And then we get to the closing of the sales pitch. The closing has just one objective. So what happens is, as the user is going through the sales pitch, all of these questions are bubbling in their mind. Should I buy this now? Is this feature really useful? Is this going to cover my entire room? All of these questions are bubbling in their mind. The job of the copywriter is to anticipate what those questions are and to start addressing them. So the closing is where we start addressing all of those, busting all of those objections. Because guess what happens if the user gets to the bottom of the sales page and we've still not addressed those questions? They defer judgment. So they're very kind to us. So they don't reject us, but what they say is that I don't have all the information I need to make the purchase today. So I'll come back after a couple of days and make a purchase when I have all that information. We saw in the earlier slide that my website's return rate was 11%, which means there's an 89% chance that they'll never come back. And so these are really small odds. So we need to make sure that our closing covers all of those negative questions. I'm going to now share a case study for one of our clients called handicappets.com, and we're going to show you how we talked about the three parts of the sales pitch, the story. We're going to talk about how we use their story to massively improve conversion rates by 38%. So this is the page that the client had. This is the top half of the page. This is the lower half of the page. You'll notice it's very content heavy. They're talking about all their wheelchairs. They're trying to give all the information up front. And our basic hypothesis was that, yes, you have the best wheelchair in the world for dogs, but when a user first comes to the website, they don't really know who we are and what makes us special as a company. So what would happen, it was a thought experiment, what would happen if we changed our focus from the product and focused on telling a little bit about who we are? So we ran an experiment where this is the treatment, this is the top half of the page, and actually I should come back here. And what you'll notice over here is we've got a picture of the founder on the bottom right corner, and we've got a description. It says, do you wish your best friend could run, play, and exercise like other pets? And that's a headline. And then we've got a description over here. And then we're not talking about the product at all. We're talking about the problem it solves. We're talking about who we are, our background, trying to show the founder image, show a video that demonstrates what the product does. And then there's a button over there. You notice it says, why buy from us? This is the number one question that the user has. If you don't convince the buyer that you are someone that they should be considering, it's meaningless to sell them on why a product is the best in the world. So when you click on why buy from us, we showed a pop-up where we are a light box, where we are actually showing the team behind the company and explaining what these guys do and what they stand for. And that's how we notice a 38% improvement in conversion rates for this page. So the only change we made was at the top of the page, we introduced their story, and then we really effectively dramatized their story. So that's how the sales pitch gets affected on the product page. So now that we've talked about this, I want to get to the final part of the presentation. And here we're going to be talking about how do we maximize impact. So you've constructed a sales pitch, you've constructed a story for your product, right? You've got an opening, you've got a middle, you've got an end, you've kind of formulated it really beautifully, you're happy with how it looks. Now the question is, okay, how do I instrument this on my product page? So I'm going to talk about, and this is the most interesting part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about a crazy idea. And I think this is surprising to me that this has not been solved already. If you go to any website in the world, your website, your competitor's website, and you go to the same website on your desktop, and you go to the same website on your mobile device, you go to the website on a Monday, and you go to the website on a Wednesday, you send that link to your friend, and they go to the website, every single person, no matter what day it is, no matter what device it is, no matter who's seeing it, is seeing that exact same product description. This means that the marketer did this incredible hypothesis where they were able to construct a sales page that was perfectly balanced for all types of buyers. And I do not think this is even humanly possible. So the idea that the description on every page is the same, to me is a huge wasted opportunity. And I'm going to talk about that next. So there isn't a perfect product page. There are only perfect product pages. And so if you're selling a wheelchair, there is a version of that wheelchair page description that might appeal to me and have the highest effect on conversion rates for me, but there's a different version of that product page that will have a different conversion rate effect for a different type of buyer, because different buyers have different shopper modalities. We behave in different ways. We analyze different things differently. We prioritize information differently. So I want to just emphasize point over here. So your shopping habits are different than mine. What motivates you is different from me. Yet when we go to a product page, we are both shown the exact same description. And I think that's a huge lost opportunity. So let's contrast this. Let's think about one of the mistakes that I think, one of the opportunities that we need to think about is, where can we learn from? Retail, maybe e-commerce is 25 years old, but retail is 300 years old, maybe even older than that, right? Maybe it's 1,000 years old. The point is that humans have been selling for a long time. So what can we learn from them? Let's think about what happens in a retail store. So if in a retail store, and I should actually go back to this slide, if you go to the retail store and if you encounter a really knowledgeable salesperson, do you know what they do? What they do is they engage you in a conversation, a very natural conversation. And through that conversation, they understand who you are, what your context is, how long you've been looking to solve this problem. Did you just happen to walk into the store because you had time to kill, or did you come to the store because you wanted to make the purchase today? Is this something that frustrates you a lot, or is this a minor annoyance for you? Are you price sensitive? Are you price insensitive? Have you looked at a lot of brands? Have you looked at very few brands? Are you a power user, or are you someone who's new to it? So imagine, I like to use the example of a blender, a juicer. There are some people that get into juicing because they really understand nutrition. There are other people that get into juicing because they simply want to lose weight. And these are different buying modalities. So the salesperson, through this very clever conversation style, is asking us a whole bunch of questions, and through those questions, they are kind of automatically bucketing us in different buckets. All of this is organic, by the way. It's not like they have a formula for it. This is how humans interact. And in that process, by the time they are done having this quick conversation with you, at the end of it, they are making a very specific recommendation. And this is the idea that I want to incorporate onto product pages. One thing I should mention before we move to the next slide is that some of you might say that, oh, Rishi, we have a wizard on our website. I don't think this is the same as a wizard, and I'll tell you why. So again, going back to that salesperson's analogy, imagine you walked into the store and the salesperson said, what are you looking for? You said, I'm looking for a blender. And the salesperson said, okay, great. But before I show you anything, I'm going to ask you 10 questions, and I'm going to then show you the perfect blender. That would be a very awkward way of having a conversation. So that's my problem with the wizards, is that the user is being shown an interface where they have to answer a bunch of questions. It's almost like a self-checkout lane in a grocery store. Doesn't seem very human. The other problem is that consumers are very aware of the fact that wizards always have a product recommendation at the end of it. So it's kind of loaded. So I want to kind of incorporate this in a much more subtle way, and I'm going to show that on the next slide. So again, the question is, what if we were to take this human technology and apply it to our product pages? So there are many ways of slicing and dicing this. So one way is to think about methodical and impulsive shoppers. And I'm going to show you an example of a case study we did for a client of ours. So here what we found was that this is a technical product. It's an air purifier, costs $800. And the consumer is not just going to buy it based on a very short description. So the client, very rightfully so, had a very detailed explanation for the product. They had the technical specs, they talked about the HEPA filter, they talked about how many cycles it does per hour, they talked about the motor behind it, all of the technical details that they knew were important. They didn't know what details mattered to what consumer, but they knew that in totality, these details really mattered because it was a higher price point item. But what we realized was that there are two types of people that are coming to this page. There are people that are really detail oriented, and then there are people that just want the quick story. They just, they're not really interested in technology. They just want to make sure that they're buying the right purifier, but they want to, even though they want short content, they want it to be really good content. And the challenge the client gave us was that I want you to write copy in a way, do the description so that it appeals to detail oriented shoppers and it appeals to people that are not looking for details. And this was a trick question by the client. And so I'm a very lazy guy. So I said, you know what, forget that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make the user do the hard work. So what we did was on the product page, when you come down to the description area, we have a headline, there's a sub headline, and then there's an explanation for what this product does in a very brief way. And then we say, how much time do you have today? Now, there are many things I want to talk about this slide. First of all, this improved conversion rates by 20%. But the thing I want to draw attention to is a couple of interesting choices we made. You notice that we didn't just ask the questions up front. Again, it goes back to the analogy of the salesperson. When you ask questions upfront without context, people will never participate in them. So what we do is we always show sales copy above it so that we are warming the user. We're warming the user and getting them over that comfort zone or getting them into that comfort zone before we ask them questions. The other thing we did was that we were trying to separate out for people who wanted a lot of details and for people who wanted very few details. But you notice the question, the buttons, the copy, it says, I have 2 minutes, I have time. Why didn't we say, give me lots of information and give me the short version? Do you know why? Because what we found was that the consumer doesn't want to feel guilty about themselves by saying, oh, I just want the short information, because nobody wants to be an ill-informed buyer. We want to be an informed buyer. So we used a proxy question. This is a very important copywriting technique. Always use a proxy question to get to the same answer. What we realized was that people who wanted the short version, they would never admit it. They would never tell us that, I just want the short version. What they would say is, I have less time. So we added this button that says, I have 2 minutes and I have time. When you click on I have 2 minutes, you see the shortened version of the sales page. It's got all the key points, but it's very much summarized. If you make the mistake of clicking I have time, we showed 5 pages worth of content. We threw everything at you and we noticed a 20%, 25% improvement in conversion rates. So this is one example of how you can actually start personalizing your product page for these different types of buyers. I'm going to talk about, actually it's a 30% improvement in conversion rates. I apologize. Then the other way of personalizing this is based on the awareness level. So the first thing we talked about was impulsive and methodical shoppers. The other way of personalizing is based on awareness levels. So this is a made up example, but we have certainly tested this for our clients. And here what's happening is we're selling a juicer. And again, you'll notice we do the same thing where we start off by describing what the product does before we start asking questions. But if you can zoom in and just pay attention to the lowest part of it, it says pick an option that best fits you. It says, the first one says, I'm new to juicing. Second one says, I'm a juicer, but I'm new to your brand. And the third one says, I'm a juicing nerd, but new to your brand. So these were the 3 awareness levels that we identified. So the first one is basically someone who's absolutely new to the category. Second person is not new to the category, but they're new to this brand. They've never bought Nash's juicer before. And then the third category is someone who's an Uber user, but they're new to your brand. So these are 3 distinct buckets we found. And what happens is, and this is why it's the ultimate cheat code, if someone clicks on I'm new to juicing, we hide the remaining 2 buttons, and the content that appears lower on the page is personalized for the person who is new to juicing. So it's exactly like in a sales floor situation where imagine the salesperson could hack the brain of the consumer and understand what their level of awareness is. We are doing this by letting the user select that and then personalize and copy. The only point I want to emphasize over here is that it has to be done in a very creative way, because it's kind of like a magic trick. If the user feels that you're just simply asking the questions to personalize content, that is very transactional. It's never going to work. It has to be done very organically. So we've very intentionally written the copy and we very gently got to the question. So it seems like an organic flow. It's happening at a subconscious level. So that's the final slide. And then I'm wrapping this up early. I want to open this up to questions, and I'm happy to actually go back to some other slides as well if you have questions. But that's my presentation talking about product pages. For those of you who are not subscribed to my newsletter and are looking for ways to like radically improve conversion rates in your product page, you can scan this little barcode. It'll take you to my sign up page, and then you'll be able to sign up and get my weekly. I do send a newsletter email once a week. I wanted to keep this short. I want to open this up to questions, and I'm happy to go back to other slides if we need to expand on them.
Wow, Rishi, thanks. That was a really detailed presentation. Our inbox is already flowing, like it's overflowing with questions. For everybody in the audience, this is probably your last chance to ask Rishi any questions. Before I take questions from the audience, though, Rishi, I can't help but wonder that you're a very sly guy. Like even when you were going, you were taking us through all of the e-commerce pages that you ended up making. I couldn't help but wonder there were so many small things that you did so nicely. Like if you can take us to the product page that you showed before this one, the one
Yeah.
of the air purifier, like this, like the copy itself is so clever. It showcases something which not a lot of people will usually care about, right? How much noise does this make, right? And you could have put the decibel level there, but you chose not to. And you're including a picture of not just the purifier, but of the purifier in its surroundings, which is just telling the users how it will look in their homes, it look in their studio, it look in their apartment or whatever. And I just can't help but wonder how much research would have gone after this. Would you like to
Yeah.
throw
So
some
is that
light
a
on?
question?
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah.
So actually, I don't want to go down a very controversial path because I think a lot of people are very upset with me for what I'm going to say next. But um, I'm not a fan of user research. All of this that you're seeing here was almost like a detective. We apply like creative reasoning. We have a model for making creative guesses about the buyer and making obvious guesses about the buyer. So all of this was done without research. But you're right, we did think about all of these things, but we did it by interrogating the client. So we actually had lots of conversations with the client, who is a product expert, versus actually talking to users. And so yeah, that's my answer.
That's beautiful. I think it just goes even in more detail to how you've named the product itself. Like EJ and Eric, that doesn't sound like a product's name, that sounds like a guy's name. And
That's true.
it just
Very
it
good
just
point.
feels like I'm bringing a friend home and not buying an air purifier. And I think that gesture itself is worthy of the 30% uplift, which is probably
That's
why
right.
you had it
And and
quite
you
easy.
you bring up a really good point. If you notice the copy over here, so how we call this technique priming. So we want to condition the buyer. So it says, in the last sentence, it says air purifiers are complicated machines. So we're already kind of creating this idea that it's a complicated machine. And you're right, we intentionally use the word EJ because we wanted to almost like animate the product. It says EJ has a lot of important features we want to share with you. And then we abruptly stop there and we say, hey, how much time do you have today? And most people will really think about that and say, you know what, there's a lot of complicated details these guys want to talk to me about, and it sends a lot of context. So very good observation. This is we what we do is we look at every single word on a page. It's kind of crazy, but we look at every single word on the page, and we look at every word or every idea that's being communicated as a tax, and we ask ourselves, is this a tax that we want the user to pay? And through that mechanism, we're able to really remove all the fat, all the unnecessary tax, and we're left with something that is really powerful, but in the least number of words.
I think that idea is really powerful. I think the idea that you can basically take a knife to your own product page and remove all the excesses from there. So what you have is just pure gold. I think that's really powerful. One more question I had in mind was, um, speaking about e-commerce, and that's the great thing about being digital, right? You can really define your audiences. So let's go back to the juicer example, right? And you might have certain keywords that you might be targeting, right? So um, let's say for somebody who's new to the space, right? They would probably Google something like best juicer under $200 or best juicer under $100. And for somebody who's more used to a juicer, they would probably do something like a NutriBullet versus this, or
Yes.
best cold press juicer or something like that. And I think that's again a really beautiful way, in the sense that you can kind of personalize your page, because you know that, hey, this query is probably going to be used by a user who's going to have an X amount of maturity level, and I can map their needs from this, the question they're asking me. Like, you know, I'm going back to the salesman analogy that you use, right? When you walk in that door, the salesman doesn't know you. They don't know if you have a juicer at home or not. But just because of how you behave and the first couple of questions you ask, they're able to make a very educated guess of your maturity. I think one could do the same thing here.
That's such a beautiful idea. Exactly right. I mean, so I always look at the world in terms of the control versus the challenger. So the control is we're living in a world where the marketer has to think about all the permutations and combinations of all of their customers and write a sales pitch that works for everybody. That is like monumentally hard. It's 50 times harder to write copy that works for all audiences versus writing copy that works for one specific audience. And then maybe it's a little inelegant. Sometimes marketers feel like, we don't want sometimes I hear clients say things like, Rishi, we're adding a button. That means the user now has to click on something to get to content. Isn't this increasing friction? And I think it's very important for us to draw a distinction between good friction and bad friction. The user does not mind clicking on a button if that means they'll get content that is 10 times more relevant to them. So we must get away from this idea of all friction is bad. It's okay for the user to click a few times if that means that they're getting to gold that is personalized for their use case.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not going to audience questions yet because I have so many of my own. One more I wanted to ask you was about using video on product pages. That's something I've not seen a lot of, but I certainly feel when done well, it's a really powerful tool. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question, and actually something that I've been writing about a lot and thinking about a lot as well. So there is a very specific reason why I like copy, which is the fact that copy is malleable, which means I can come up with 10 different versions of this sales pitch on this page in 4 days. But I certainly cannot come up with 10 different versions of the video because it's so much more expensive, so much more complicated. So what I tell brands is that there is no doubt, and having done this for donkey's years, I've done so many video tests, and I can tell you a very interesting statistic when it comes to testing video is that the video quality actually does not matter as much. Having a video is always more effective, all else being equal, than not having a video. So if a page doesn't have a video and you add a video, it is, even if the video is long, even if it's bad quality, you are going to see a bump in conversion rates because people are so used to consuming video content. However, here is my recommendation. Start optimization with copy, because by optimizing the copy, you can figure out the right formulation, the perfect combination of the script that produces the best impact. Convert that script into a video for a multiplier effect, and then continue optimizing the copy for a future video. So that's how you maximize using video.
Yeah, I think also one might be inclined to believe that, you know, with certain search engines preferring video content, there's a higher chance that your page would rank higher on Google or any other search engine just because of having some video content on the page,
That's
right?
true.
Uh, cool. Now I can finally go to the audience questions. So Ellen, thanks you for the great presentation, and she wants to ask you if I'll go verbatim here. She says, can we create the three buckets on landing pages instead of websites?
So instead of like the product page, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. So I want to give some context over here. A lot, I get this question a lot, like, Rishi, you're focused on product pages. Can we hire you, or can we focus on landing page optimization? So I have no principal concern with landing pages. I love landing pages. I think what happens is that the behavior intent is different on the landing page. What we find in heat tracking studies and user recordings is that when users first click on an ad and they come to a page, they very quickly navigate from that page. They move around very quickly. They're clicking around very quickly, and they come to a grinding halt when they come to the product page. So no matter how your funnel is structured, people are going to very quickly navigate through that funnel, whether it's a landing page, it's a category page, it's a home page. You'll notice in your recordings, people are very quickly navigating. And then when you come to the product page, they come to a grinding halt. And the reason for this is that we have been conditioned to know what to expect once we cross the product page, which is that we have to enter our credit card information. And so for me, the concern with landing, you can absolutely do these kind of buckets on the landing page, but keep in mind that people are not paying a lot of attention on the landing page. They're paying a lot more attention on the product page. It is for that reason that I like to focus on product pages. But to Nancy's question, you can 100% apply these same principles. You can even have a system where on the landing page, you're asking that question, and then when they come to the product page, the content is personalized based on the selection they made.
Yeah, I think that really brings us to the next question from Mo. And she's saying that her client has taken the PDP out of the customer journey. So the landing page for the paid media is a product landing page. And so she wants some opinions around how one should structure the product landing pages. So her question is, should it be a mix of informative and sales content?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific answer. I haven't seen this page, but I think sales and information, yeah, they kind of go hand in hand, right? So
But would
yes.
you even recommend that taking the product description page or the customer journey itself?
So I guess I don't follow that part. So they are taking people directly from the ad to the product page, correct?
To the product landing page. So they have a like a hybrid-esque page, I'm thinking. So the landing
Oh,
page is doubling up as a product page, and the
I
actual
see,
PDF
I see.
is not
So
there.
it's a landing. So it's basically it's a landing page then, right? So it's a landing page, and then it's yeah. I have no yeah. So actually so this is actually a very good question actually, and I want to answer this question because this is something I encounter a lot. So some of the clients I work with, they actually don't have a product page. What they do is they take people to a landing page where there's a lot of information, and then from the landing page itself, you can start the checkout process. So in a way, I'm kind of violating my own principle because I consider myself the product page guy. I think one of the things I should clarify here for the audience is that what is the definition of a product page? So I don't necessarily look at the product page as being the traditional definition of product page. I look at the product page as being the page where the bulk of the heavy lifting of the selling happens. So if you have a landing page that is essentially doing the bulk of the job of the product page of selling and informing the buyer about what the product does and differentiating the products from the competitors and really kind of amplifying desire, then to me, even though traditionally that will be called a landing page, I would still mentally categorize that as a product page. So in that case, I have no problem with just working on that itself. We don't need to take people to the physical product page. But whatever page where we're doing the heavy lifting is what the product page is.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more there, especially on the checkout bit, right? With Google Pay and PayPal buttons, right? It's very easy to create a checkout flow which is which starts and finishes on that page right there. And I think that's again, taking friction out of the equation, but I think that's unwanted friction that one would very much want not to be part of the case. Um, so Sahil has a question for you. He says, "Hi Rishi, how important is the structure of a page? What should be first, the product video or reviews?"
Structure is really important. We don't do any testing around. We're actually the weirdest conversion agency in the world. So not only do we only focus on product pages, which is a weird thing, but even within the product page, we never change the layout of the page. We're only working with the description. So Sahil, to answer your question, we actually never do testing where we kind of say, okay, what happens if we take the video lower or if we take the reviews higher? But your question also gets into the structure of the sales pitch, and I would say the structure really matters. So that's why in my presentation I had the opening, the middle, and the end. The opening really matters. In fact, I would say if I had to sacrifice two elements, I would sacrifice the middle and the end, but I would absolutely focus on the opening. Because what we find from analytics data is that our biggest hurdle, our biggest challenge is not convincing the buyer to buy. Our biggest challenge is that the buyer leaves us in 10 seconds. So if we don't nail the opening, we're basically screwed. And so for that reason, the opening of the sales pitch is really important. The structure really matters. I think we don't focus enough on the structure. And I think we need to think more about the structure and experiment more with different structures to see what actually resonates with our types of buyers.
So yeah, here's where the sales pitch for VWO comes in, guys. Go and test the structure of your page with VWO, and you'll find
Absolutely.
that out for yourself. Um, okay, Rishi, I have a question from Anthony. So Anthony is in a weird, I would say, lucky space where he has a site that has more than 30,000 SKUs.
Oh,
And he says, how would you suggest going about writing sales pitches for 30,000 SKUs?
that's a really good question, Anthony. I'm so happy that this question came in because I get this question very regularly, especially for big brands. They'll say, Rishi, we understand what you're saying, but we have 50,000 SKUs, so what you're saying doesn't make sense. So Anthony, to answer your question, I am pretty confident. Now, unless if you are a fashion apparel brand where there is a quick fashion brand where you're constantly updating your inventory, that's a very unique use case. My CRO approach does not work there. It does work there in a different way. But to answer your question, Anthony, I would look at your sales data. This is really interesting question because you need to look at the distribution of sales. If you follow, there's a principle called Zipf's law, but there are lots of distribution laws that talk about the fact that you have probably like 10% of your products are driving like 40-50% of your sales. That's not always the case, but it's typically the case. So what I would say, Anthony, is that you are trying to identify the best selling products on your website, and then you start doing sales pitch optimization on those pages. I do want to actually, for Anthony, answer a different question, very related to what he's saying, because this is something we've developed a solution for, because we ran into this problem a lot for clients where they would have like 10-15 products that were each doing like 500,000 in sales. So they had enough transactions where we could do testing in all of them. And but we can't work on 10 pages, right? Because we are so hyper focused on one page. So Anthony, I have a very simple solution for you. So my solution is that if you want to do experimentation on all your product pages, you have 30,000 SKUs, that's great. You need to kind of narrow your focus to the something we call the why we exist story. So what I mean is that, as we mentioned in the presentation earlier, the key thing is that before the user is even ready to kind of understand what your product does, they need to be comfortable with you as a brand. They need to trust you as a brand. There is no point selling them on how amazing your purifier is if they don't trust what you're saying. So what we like to do in that case is, we run an experiment using VWO. We run an experiment where we, for 50% of the audience on all the product pages, at a strategic location, one good location might be to the right of the price point. And the reason I like to add buttons to the right of the price is because we know from heat tracking studies, people are hyper focused on price. There is no doubt that the biggest criteria for shoppers is your price point. So they are really focusing there. So if you want to address their anxiety, which is why they focus there, it's important to place a button right next to the price point. There's usually a nice open space. Like even in this example, in Nash's juicer, there's right next to 99.99, there is a little space. I would use that space and I would say something like new here, NEW, new here, question mark. And you apply this experiment. This experiment is run on all your pages. When you click on new here, you will show a light box pop up where you're talking to them about what makes your brand special. Now, the challenge here is you're not writing a sales page that is personalized for this product, but you're writing a sales page that needs to work for all of your products. And actually, this is a very effective strategy. On product pages, we're able to improve conversion rates by like 15 or 20 or 30%. This approach does not give you that kind of a lift, but it'll give you a lift of 10% on your site-wide conversions, which is actually a lot. So you can expect to see a 10% improvement in conversion rates if you are able to convincingly explain to people why they should trust you as a brand. And you can reference the product, but you obviously can't personalize the content because you can't change it for every product page. I'm going to give Anthony two more tips here real quick. One is, Anthony, when you do this experiment, you must set up tracking for people that clicked on that button next to the price point. Because what happens is you might feel like that's a very prominent location and people will click on it. You might find through VWO that only 5% of people clicked on it. So then what happens is you go back, do a follow-up experiment where you are changing the design of it. Maybe you're changing the design around it to draw more attention to it. We make this very big mistake as marketers of assuming that just because something is on a page, people are seeing it. And the data is absolutely not supporting this at all. So just because it's on the page does not mean that your experiment worked. Because if people didn't see that button and click on the button, let's say, for example, you do the experiment and you find that it had no impact on conversion rates. Okay, so you might say Rishi's idea was a bad idea. But if you look at the number of people that clicked on it, and if you find the number of people that clicked on the button was 2%, I would argue that your experiment was meaningless, because if only 2% of people saw it and interacted with it, then your sales copy is invisible to 98% of buyers, which is a much bigger sample than the 2%. So your problem is not the fact that your sales pitch didn't work, it's the fact that people weren't interacting with your sales pitch. So go back and make that call to action more visible. The other tip I want to give Anthony is that at the bottom, this is a genius idea. And I'm sorry I couldn't cover this in this presentation, but I have screenshots for it as well. But at the bottom of that presentation, not presentation, at the bottom of that sales pitch, which you're running on all the pages, so it's a short description of what makes your brand special, ask a very simple question. Did we answer your question? And it's got a yes, no, but thumbs up and thumbs down. And what you will find, and you will track this in VWO, track this as clicks, and look at the proportion of people that said yes and proportion of people that said no. Very few people interact with it. So don't look at the absolute numbers. You'll probably get at most, you'll get 100 people clicking on it, either one of them. So don't be upset by, oh my God, 10,000 people activated the pop-up, but only 500 people or 100 people interacted with it. That number is always going to be low, not because it's not visible, because people typically don't interact with these things. But what you can pay attention to, Anthony, is the proportions of the yes, no clicks. Because if the number of people clicking no is, let's say, 40 or 50%, or maybe it's even 60%, that tells you that your sales pitch sucks and you did not answer people's questions. So what you do, and this is why I think it's the ultimate cheat code, because my shopper is telling me if the sales pitch that I put together work for them or not. So you go back and you run a new experiment where you rewrite your description. So I gave a very, very long answer for Anthony, but he had a very good question. So hopefully this makes sense.
Rishi, your kind of long answer gives me another point. You always stress on the why we exist story. So what would be Rishi's tip to somebody who's a drop shipper who's running maybe 50 stores and is out there to make a quick buck? What is Rishi's tip to that guy?
That's a trick. It's a tricky one. I mean, that's a tricky one. I mean, we cannot say that I exist so I can make a lot of money, right? So it's a tricky one. I mean, you have to really ask yourself, what is the value you're delivering to the buyer? So one of the things that we like to do is that, for example, if I'm working for, this is a very good point actually. So if I'm working for a brand, so obviously we typically work for brands that manufacture their own products. And so we are crafting a very different story for them. But if I'm working for a brand that is a reseller, like for example, if I was like Zappos and I was working for Zappos, I would focus in on the fact that I'm actually not related to the manufacturer. So I would basically say that, listen, we are not Nike, and Nike has no choice but to keep Nike shoes. We have kept this runner or this jogger of Nike because we have evaluated, we had no relationship with any manufacturer, and we evaluated all the manufacturers out there and concluded that this is the best product. So one of the things that a dropshipper could do is a dropshipper could basically say that, listen, I'm an advocate for you, for the consumer, and I am a neutral third party, and I've studied every single product in this category, and I've found one supplier that actually has a really good product for in terms of value for money, because value for money changes depending on your price point. So we can say for this price point, this manufacturer is the best. And that's why you're kind of like positioning yourself as doing curation for the buyer. That's your why we exist story. I will say it's a little weak story. It's not a super strong story, but I would say that if you're a drop shipper, it is the strongest story you can come up with. So hopefully this answers your question.
Rishi, another question. This one's probably my favorite question of the bunch. What is your take on free shipping?
Oh, what is my take on free shipping? Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's
do you think
so.
highlighting it on the product page is a good thing? Would it lead to a sizable lead in conversions? What does
Yeah.
your experience say about?
Oh, I mean, it is a secular trend. There is no study in the world. So so basically, given a choice between a product that costs $100 with $10 of shipping versus the product that costs $110 with free shipping, the free shipping version will always win. There has never been a test that's been run where that's not been true. And I think one of the things that we have to think about is, again, it depends on how we define the control. So what are we comparing to? A lot of times online retailers look at other retailers as their comparison, and I think that's a valid point, but we are actually comparing to the behavior of consumers in a retail store, and that's what we are online commerce is competing against offline commerce. Primarily that's what we are competing against. And therefore, when you think about it from that perspective, when you buy from a retail store, you do have a hidden cost. You have to drive to the store, you have to spend time in the store, and you have to drive back and fuel and time, whatever. But you're not paying them for shipping if you're buying in the store. And so the free shipping is a huge psychological barrier, or it's the lack of free shipping is a huge psychological barrier. So I'm absolutely in favor of it. When we do testing and experimentation, we never focus on policies. So if a client has a bad return policy, or if they have no return policy, or if they don't have free shipping, we try to divorce ourselves from that, because we don't control that, and we really focus on storytelling. So if I had a choice to tell the client to offer free shipping, I would say 100% do it. But if they don't offer free shipping, that does not prevent me from writing a sales pitch that is so mesmerizing, so captivating, that I will still get a massive improvement in conversion rates, even without free shipping.
Yeah, that's powerful. That kind of brings me to a second question. Would you show a discount right there on the product page, right? So what I'm asking is, we have National Juicer for $99. Would you say 120 with a strike through and then 99? Or similarly, would you say that buy this now and get free shipping only valid for the next 20 minutes or something like that?
So that's a good question, and this is where I want to be completely honest with the audience and say that we actually don't do any testing in those areas. So I can talk about it conceptually, but my knowledge will be just as good as your knowledge. I don't have any data to support it. Sure, I mean, I don't have a good answer for this. I'm so focused on the sales pitch that I don't really think too much about. Now, what I will say, one thing I will say, is that whenever we give a discount, this is the cardinal sin that marketers make, is that they'll say 120, they'll strike it out, and they'll say 99, and they'll just leave it at that. Consumers are very used to getting discounts. So what will happen is people will see that and they'll say like, okay, great, awesome. So what we like to do is we like to emphasize the discount. So to the right of the discount, we'll have a link that says why this discount. And when you click on it, we'll give them a really nice story that says, like, for example, we never give discounts, but we're giving this special discount because we hope that you will buy the product and you will love it so much that you will tell all your friends about it. And so you will do free advertising for us or something like that. When the buyer understands what is expected from, see, the thing is that the reality is that the consumer knows that there is nothing known as a free gift. So when the marketer says, I'm genuinely giving you a free gift, that's just a horrible strategy, because the consumer doesn't buy it. But if you're able to convert that and say that, listen, this is actually not a free gift, I'm actually converting you to my sales force because I'm confident that you will love the product so much that I'm willing to lose money on this sale because I know you'll tell 2 of your friends about me. Now the consumer's like, oh, okay, now I get his angle. So what I would say is that never give a discount without a sales pitch supporting that discount. That's what I'd say.
Well, it's all about the story, isn't it?
It's all about the story.
Yeah, I think I would just, probably due to paucity of time, probably go on to our last question. This is from Bill. And Bill asked, what do you think that users would go back and click on the other buttons as well? He's wondering if this might happen due to natural curiosity, or the users just might want to see different versions of the page.
That's a really good question, Bill. And I think this is where it gets very interesting. So you want to make sure that that's exactly right. So you want to design it in a way where a skeptical buyer, if they go back and they want to click on, I'm a juicing nerd, for example, that the content is actually personalized for that user. We don't track for this to see how many people went and clicked multiple buttons, but I always write copy in a way where it's genuine. See, this is the important thing. None of what I'm talking about are marketing hacks. I want to get away from this whole idea of hacking the buyer or duping the buyer or somehow getting them to buy from us. Let's be more authentic, and we have to ask ourselves, is this genuinely improving the experience of the buyer? So there might be scenarios where you actually might have 3 buttons but have the same sales copy for all 3 buttons, or maybe one minor tweak. And I kind of feel like that's actually a disservice, because at that point is you're using it as a hack. You're giving the buyer the perception that this is personalized when in reality it's not. And maybe only 2% of people will actually fact check and go back and check it, but I still feel like that's not the right thing. So my recommendation to Bill is, before having the buttons, ask yourself, does this categorization even make sense for my brand? Should I have 2 buttons versus 3 buttons? Should I frame the buttons differently? Because whatever you're testing should genuinely help the buyer and also help you, but it should make sense for both parties.
Yeah, I think again, just having that element where it would just increase the engagement. Even if there's like a small subsection of your user base which is coming again to see what the other buttons are, that means they're really engaging well with your story, right? And if you
Exactly.
have a captive audience, selling to that captive audience just becomes so much more easier. So I think Rishi is onto something here. I think that's a really powerful trip. Okay, Rishi, I think would you want to take one more question, or I think we can do one more. So this one's on design. I know you said that you don't focus on design but on stories, but for Sarthak's benefit, I'm going to take this one. He said, if given a choice, what would you do? Make the UX of the website really simple and keep it really traditional, or would you do a more radical UX design to entice young customers? So he's focusing on the new customers, on possibly teenagers who just coming onto the online shopping scene, digital natives. What would you do differently for them?
Yeah, so I think this is I don't know if you guys can see it, but behind me is my favorite book on copywriting. It's called Adweek Copywriting Handbook. I've read the book, 7, 8 times now. It is my Bible for copywriting. And one of the things that the author talks about, Joseph Sugarman talks about, is that every product has a nature. So there is an inherent nature in the product. So if you are selling, for example, a smoke detector, which is a security device which protects your family if there's a fire in the house, that has a very specific nature versus a juicer that has a different nature. So the question is about targeting the radical UI UX. Now this is kind of outside of the scope of my discussion and my area of expertise, but I'll answer the question. Given a choice between a radical UI UX for a demographic that is digital native, that is the nature of the product, that is the nature of their audience, I would say that totally makes sense. I think also if it's a very edgy brand or if it's a very edgy kind of product, part of our appeal is the fact that we're completely different, right? We're rule breakers. And so in a way, you kind of have to break the UI UX rules to stand out. So in that use case, it would make sense. But I can't give any scientific response because I have no evidence for it, but intuitively it makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks for that answer, Rishi. You've been more than helpful. We've had so many questions. I'm sorry for the audience members whose questions we couldn't take. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have today. Please feel free to write to us or message Rishi on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure he would love to reply to all of your questions over there. And yeah,
And
one
if you
last
guys
one.
have a smartphone and you're on your desktop, scan this, sign up for my newsletter. Once a week, I share conversion insights. I spend 20% of my time studying what other marketers are doing because I'm the dumbest guy in the room. So I like to really get inspiration from really clever marketers. And oftentimes, the most clever, innovative marketing ideas are not coming from the biggest brands in the world. They're coming from obscure brands you've never heard of. So I spend a lot of time studying them. Excuse me. And then I kind of, in my swipe file, I record the best examples. And then once a week, I like to share what I found. So if you're looking for quick hits of ideas that you've never, just blow your mind or blow your mind in a very unconventional way, I think you might like my newsletter.
Yeah, I'm personally a subscriber to Rishi's newsletter, and I can advocate it very strongly. Feel free to join for it while it's free. Rishi might just make it a Substack and start charging us for it. Thank you, Rishi, once again. Thank you, everybody, for attending. That's it for
Thanks,
today. Bye-bye.
guys. Bye.